We're going to be going over how to correctly shade a sphere for this lesson. So I have my handy gray-orange right here, and I uploaded a photo, and it's pretty easy to see from this photograph how the values darken as they move away from the highlight. So we have our highlight right here, and you can start to see that the value forms rings as it moves out, and then we have our shadow line right here. I went ahead and put it in grayscale so you can see this even more clearly, that there's a nice clean shadow line. And then I posterized it. So on the left I did 7 values, and on the right I did 5. And I think that really helps us to see how the values form this illusion of a sphere. Now we're gonna start out by setting up our rings, and then we'll go into kind of how to blend these different rings. So regardless of which technique you're using, the first step's gonna be the same for setting up. I want you to grab some sort of cup or something to trace around this size. It doesn't need to be too big or too small. And go ahead and trace just 2 spheres for yourself to work with, okay? These are just practice. This should be a completely different piece of paper from your other drawing, okay? This is practice. Now, first step, let's look at a couple examples. I have my stippling example, my original example, but the concept's the same. You can see a highlight, and you can see the values decreasing as they move outward. And I have a couple cross-hatching examples I've done this morning. I have one here and one here. And these are done slightly differently, and I'm gonna show you, I think this one actually goes this way. I'm gonna show you the difference in setting these up. Regardless of what you're doing, your first step is to draw your ring. So your highlight should be fairly small, and where you place this highlight on the sphere is gonna end up determining where the light comes from your entire drawing. Now I'm gonna move outward. My second value layer should probably bump up to the edge of my sphere here. Okay, I have my second ring, and now I'm moving down, following the curvature of this sphere. And I can clean up my lines as I go. I'm drawing very lightly at this point, and I'm gonna add my shadow line. I'm gonna start with just a 5 value sphere and add some transitions in to keep it simple. Okay. Now I'm gonna use pen for my cross-hatching. That's my preferred medium. I have my favorite liner right here. Now, just keep in mind with any drawing, and this is very different than painting, move the paper rather than moving the angle that you're moving your arm. Okay, we have a natural direction that's most comfortable for our arm to move, so why not take advantage of that? So I'm gonna actually flip. Now, for this first style of hatching, we're gonna use what's called contour line. Contour line means it follows the shape of the image, the line work or the shading. Now we already have some contour lines here to work with in our rings. So for my first, I'm always gonna start dark to light. Okay, so I'm starting on my darkest shadow, and all my line work, remember this is a dark value, so I want my lines close together, should be following the curvature of the sphere. Now, as I get to the middle, I'm gonna pause and go from the other side, because our lines will end up meeting in the middle. I'm gonna come back and darken this value. I can tell it's gonna be too light. So I'm adjusting the angle of my curves as I work my way in. I can always come back and darken. Let's just kind of finish the line work. Okay, and then I'm gonna end up with kind of a straight line there. Now, this needs to be darker, so I'm gonna come back in and push my value. Okay, we should be on this darkest shadow fairly close to black. And I'm gonna come through and really darken this. Now, for my cross hatching, we obviously need to cross in the other direction, but the same concept's gonna apply where we want to cross using contour lines. So we're gonna be crossing at the same shape as the circle or as the sphere. I really should be working from the edge, not from how I was doing it. That's better. Now I'm on my darkest value, so I'm gonna come through and darken this. You're not gonna see those like lines right here. So now that I have my basic contour set up, I'm gonna come through and really push the value because I want this close to black. It's gonna be the darkest value in my shape, so. Don't fear going too dark. We tend to, as students, do the opposite and stay too light. So really go for it. Okay, pay attention to any areas within that ring that are of a darker value. Now, I want to extend this curvature onto my next ring, but I'm going to go every other line. And you'll see why we want a lighter value, but we don't want to create something too different. We want to follow that curve. And I'm going to do the same on the other side. And then the concept as we move through the sphere is more or less the same for each ring. I'm just making my lines further as I move outward. But I'm going to continue the same concept. And I'm going very quickly right now for this demo. I would expect my lines to be better. Now I'm going to go maybe every 3 and follow that curvature to create it lighter. So as you can see, and then maybe I'm going to go every other. But what I'm doing is, as I work my way in, I'm creating a darker value. And we always need to come back, right? So I can see these stages are too far apart. So this is the time where I start working backwards. I'm gonna start by smoothing out the transition here and then darkening this value. I'm also holding my pen now at an angle. So I'm gonna get a lighter line when I do that. And that's gonna help create a lighter value as well. So I'm gonna add some contours here, but keep it lighter. And ultimately I'm gonna come through, and I would do quite a bit more work to this. I would continue this transition now, try and smooth that out. Continue to darken this mid-tone here until I end up with something a little smoother like this. And then even once, you know, you have that, you're gonna wanna come in and just clean it up. You're gonna start seeing areas that need a little more ink, areas that don't transition smoothly, and then that's a good time at the end to come back in and do some cleanup work. Okay, I'm gonna show you another option for cross-hatching. Same first step. I'm going real quick. Draw your rings. You can do much better than I did right here. And we're still gonna start with our darkest value, but in the second option, and here's my example of it, I used more of a hashtag style cross-hatching where I'm layering, and some of you did that on your mountainscape. So the same idea, I'm gonna start in my darkest area. I actually have one half done here, so I'll pick up on that. I'm starting filling in my darkest area, getting it to a really black, almost black value. And then instead of just like starting on this next line, I'm extending some of those lines, but as I work towards my lightest value, they're gonna be further apart. But there still should be, they should be interconnected. That's gonna help with that smooth transition rather than having unnatural steps between your value. And I can just kind of do the same thing. I can keep extending, and as I get out towards the highlight, my values are decreasing. So this one's gonna have fairly light value. This one's gonna get darker, darker, darker. And again, my ring is gonna be, my shadow or my outer ring is gonna be my darkest value. So as you continue you'll get something that looks like this. If you notice, I did, as I get into the smaller sections, I still use that smaller hashtag style shading, but I did apply a little bit of that contour because it just really helps create a realistic illusion. Okay, so experiment with these techniques if you plan on using cross hatching for your final.